Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. This is Kevin Saray, CEO of Appvance, joining for this webinar here with Rebecca Barthel and
Rajesh.
So we've got the three of us. We're going to give just a short preview of Unified Test Platform, which is a really new and we think transformative offering for the industry, really targeted at and improving really QA productivity and speed from dev testers to QA team people to business analysts in a very substantial way. So we're really going to give just a quick overview and a few slides and get right into a few demonstrations on the platform itself. So let me move on here. And there's really just a few slides. We think that in listening to and sitting down with over 150 companies over the last 3 years, SQA has not evolved with DevOps in the way that people want to move, especially in large enterprises. And that has been a challenge. It's been a challenge for everybody in this space. And we recognize that enterprises are moving very fast, and they're trying to shift some of this left. And it's been very, very hard to take QA tools that were built for multi-month workflows that frankly were architected 20 years ago. They're just not DevOps ready in the way that we think about it. What we see is enterprises often hit what they call the QA wall, and they get stuck, whether it's a 1 day or a 3 week or a several week build cycle. They might be able to, release cycle. They might be able to do a build every hour or every 10 minutes, but they're really stuck at a release cycle that is much, much longer. And so a dozen or more different tools. Some of them are open source, some of them are not open source. They don't weave together well. Scripting knowledge requires knowledge of multiple scripting languages. And in the end, teams often skip tests to improve the velocity with those old tools. So again, even though their build cycle gets very fast, the release cycle still stays at a very long time, and that's painful, as everybody knows. When we sat down and watched what people do, and I know we've got a lot of QA team members as well as dev testers on the webinar today, I think nobody would disagree. The pain of automated testing is the maintenance and the creation of these use cases, whether it's scripts or recordings or whatever. And that running them actually doesn't take very long. Certainly the human time in running a test is basically to push the button. It's not really very difficult. So I think there was a feel 2 or 3 years ago in the industry that we would integrate with a CI tool and that would reduce the QA time. Well, look, integrating with CI is table stakes today. Of course you're going to do that. Just the truth is it doesn't really reduce time that is spent by humans as developers executing tests or as QA team members executing tests. And that's because the time it takes to push the button to start a test just wasn't that much. It was a few percent of the overall QA time. So when you dig in, you find out, of course, it's not a surprise that maintaining those tests as applications change and creating them in the first place is where all of the time is spent. So much time that still there are many organizations that say we're just going to stick with manual testing because it takes so long to maintain our tests. Well, that's terrible. So we really spent the last 3 years working on how do we maintain tests in a faster way when things do change, and how do we create them faster. And I don't know whether we've done everything right, but boy, we've really, really taken a great stab for the first time, I think, in 20 years at rethinking all of those processes. And nobody wants any of the QA processes to be a bottleneck. So we looked at this and said unit and functional and performance and compatibility and load and stress and app penetration, all of those are the tests that most enterprises want to execute before they release any application, whether it's an application that goes out to the public or an application that is behind their firewall. It's just too risky to do a release without touching all of these in some way. And so smart enterprises have been doing this for a long time, a decade or more. And what we've done is finally combine these into a single platform that in most cases can reuse the same use cases. So you can write one or hundreds of use cases for a particular application and utilize those across virtually all of these tests without having to rewrite them. That means you can take a single script and use it for functional testing, use it for browser compatibility, use it for performance, create a load test at the API level from that, use it for use case driven app penetration, and so on. That is not a miracle, though it sounds like it. It's just listening to customers and great programming for 3 years. So within this platform, you can create tests, build out very complex scenarios, and we're going to open with the scenario builder in a second. You can run those tests and then finally analyze the results. And that unification immediately saves tremendous amount of time. The number of organizations, in fact, every organization today, rewrites the same use cases over and over and over again. They'll write something, they'll write a portion of it maybe for a unit test, then they'll rewrite the whole thing in a functional test or integration test or smoke test, and then they'll reuse and rewrite the same use case in some different tool for a performance test. If they do that, they'll rewrite it again at the API level for a load or scalability test. They'll rewrite it again if they're doing browser compatibility. They'll rewrite it again if they're doing use case driven app penetration. So we watched often the same use case being rewritten in different languages by different siloed teams, sometimes 5, 6, or 7 times. We eliminate that from the get-go, and that was the first thing we could do. I will go back here. We've also created a variety of different interfaces. You'll see a little bit of that today, so that developers or QA people or business analysts can all work together on the same platform and do something in there. We fully support all the major open source script types, so you can use our designer scripts, which are incredibly powerful, and we'll show you a little bit of that recording today, or frankly import any of these older script types and use them, whether it's Selenium WebDriver or JMeter or Perl or JRuby or Jython or Groovy or whatever, SOAP UI, we use them all, import them all, run them all, and they can all run together in the same scenario. So you can intermix any of these different scripts with other types of scripts. In fact, you can even intermix platform types in the same scenario. So I might have an application that gets set up on Windows, it gets manipulated in HTML5 in a browser, and then finally gets delivered to a user in mobile, and all of those go in the same scenario. All automated, all working together. I mean, a very, very powerful concept. We also support recording. This type of recording works across all different platforms as well. You can record on mobile, you can record on HTML5, Ajax, JavaScript, AngularJS. You can record on thick Java clients. You can record on Windows and Citrix. So this is really, really powerful. You can use all those different languages later and intermix them in a scenario, and then we create an object repository that eliminates some of the maintenance headaches. You can even run all your functional tests in parallel, unlike some of the older tools that many enterprises are using that I know you're all very familiar with. For dev testers and developers, you can take your JUnit test and your TestNG test that you've already written today in any DSL that you've used, and we can data enable those. And actually, we create hundreds or even thousands of thread-safe containers with each of those in it, running in parallel, but data enabled from our data production library. So you can imagine taking unit test coverage. I know there's one customer who's already using UTP today, and they took their test coverage from their unit test coverage from 3% to over 90% without writing another line of code. The platform handles this for you. There's nothing to write. That data production library and all those thread-safe environments automatically handle session IDs, etc., whatever has to happen. So we're going to jump to Rajesh now, who's going to take over driving right in UTP right away. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. Rajesh is on.
Hi. So I hope everybody's seeing my desktop.
We are.
Okay. So this is the main Appvance UTP dashboard. So the major icons here are the record, where you can record
any of those
script types. And once you record the scripts, you've data-driven them. You want to build different complex scenarios which are running in sequence, in parallel, and data driving through different formats. and you want to be able to play those scenarios on different platforms like cloud, hybrid, on-premise. All of that is set up in this platform. And then we have very nice graphs and plots where you can analyze the results. And then you
very sophisticated output of those results. Yeah. The thing about this platform is because it is set up for everybody to work together. When we say unified, we mean unified in a number of ways. These buttons are a great way to say, hey, I'm going to go build a scenario out of existing scripts, or I'm going to build a scenario out of things I just recorded. But at the same time, all of this is accessible outside the platform through an entire interface for dev testers where they would never necessarily need to be on this platform. They'd never see a build button or a play button or anything else. You could create your tests outside the platform. You can execute the test in the platform from outside the platform with a number of interfaces from Chef Delivery to all of our REST interfaces, and then you can actually analyze them outside the platform. So we'll show you some of that. Yeah, that's a good example right there.
Right. So
there was a Ruby execution of a scenario, right? So our scenario files are actually XML files that around a Ruby wrapper we have standardized versions of those, and you can modify those in Ruby to do whatever you want. So if you're a dev tester, you can run any kind of test, not worry about how it runs. The platform handles that and delivers back your pass or fail criteria.
Okay. So the first thing I want to show you is the platform concept comes from the scenario builder. And so let's go to the scenario builder. I've created a sample performance test scenario here. There are a number of scenarios that are possible.
Different types of tests. Unit test, functional, database, Append, DDoS, browser compatibility, performance load, synthetic, and others. Synthetic APM, that is.
Right. And you can set up all the parameters that you're used to in a normal performance test. This section where you're creating the test cases, so we have notion of multiple test cases. Every time you add a new test case by clicking on this button, these test cases will be executed in parallel.
Or delayed, or however you want to set it up. That's right. There's unlimited number of settings to set this up in any way you want.
And inside each test case, you can add any number of scripts in any one of these languages.
In any order, and any language in combination. Doesn't really matter. They all run.
Now, once you have these languages, you can run it if it is a UX script in a different types of browsers. You can bring in data-driven features into the scripts that you are executing. You can add additional arguments if these are in kind of a command line execution. We have additional setup phase, teardown phases, depending on the complexity of your application. You can run your tests on cloud platforms. Example, test locations could be a box under your desk.
Yeah, actually, this is interesting because test locations can be anything you want. You can add a cloud, of course, Amazon, SoftLayer, OpenStack, automatically come up any kind of grid that you've got behind your firewall. This is a hybrid application, can run behind the firewall, can run outside in the cloud, can run in hybrid mode, and also you can name these, say, as regions. So when you set these up, you can set the bandwidth, you can set a variety of parameters, including packet loss and delays and these sorts of things to mimic, say, a mobile network. So you could set up a set of servers and call that mobile network in Germany, even though those servers are at Amazon, in Seattle.
So this is the play part of it. Now we have different types of monitors to monitor the server side that can be brought in.
Let's talk about that. So the system comes with monitors. They go on any server that you've got, whether it's a database server or your application server or your web server or back-end servers or what, it doesn't really matter, messaging systems, all get monitors so that coordinated back in your reports are how each of those servers performed during those tests. CPU, I/O, heap, et cetera, et cetera. So that automatically comes. And if you want to integrate this with, say, AppDynamics or other kinds of APM, this is fully integrated with that as well.
So the important part about this section, the resource section, is that we have different ways of driving data into your scripts. And this is part of one of the key features of the platform. The data can be shared through a database, through an array of strings, or as a hash map. And this brings a common language to composing scripts, composing data drivers to those scripts. And we have a number of options for the various applications that we typically integrate with. Now, in terms of executing the test case, I could have pressed the play button, but I'm going to go ahead and use Jenkins because we have an integration with Jenkins. I'm going to execute it through Jenkins. So Jenkins is talking to Appvance through a plugin, and the plugin knows which scenario to execute, and it is this performance scenario that I just authored. And so you're getting to see how easily Appvance is integrated into a CI tool like Jenkins, and it integrates with a wide variety of CI tools. So these are these test browsers that are popping up. They're popping up on this node because I set it up as localhost, but typically you'll be running them on your cloud or your test node that you set up in your network. It is executing the Spree application, and this is a designer script. It's a UX script, and we will go through those reports. Now, all of this you can track through your Jenkins log. This is all being set up. It's very easy to use our plugin. We highly recommend executing through Jenkins.
Or any CI tool, it doesn't really matter.
Right? I want to add a quick note about these test cases. Typically, what we see customers is that they want to mix and match scripts. So this scenario has a lot of intelligence in it. I could execute a designer script that takes the data from a CSV file. I could follow it up with a SQL file that checks the database is consistent after the designer script is executed. And you can follow this up with other Java programs or anything like that running in sequence. So not only is it just a way for you to test your systems, it is also a way to really do a root cause analysis if an issue is reported like the website is slow. Have your intelligence embedded in these scripts, in these scenarios, and just execute them. The test is done. The report is generated. I'm going to go to the analyze part of the platform. So as you saw, the report is available in your Jenkins log. You click on it. You come to the analyze part. This is our report phase, the report part of the platform. And it depends on how much you want to save, but we can save all the requests and responses in your performance test. If you need to, you typically would not. If you're running this as a step-by-step, then you use the scalability index. If you have wide variety of tests, you will see the total number of failures and passes. And all of these are telling you your vital statistics about the test node and the console, which is where you run the machine on. And this is what we're talking about, the graphs. Right? We have really modern plots and charts that really help you home in. The iteration summary is a downloadable CSV file. That has all the raw data that you want, and you can customize what's in this chart, in this CSV file.
We have fully custom. All these reports are customizable. The graphs, charts are customizable. The outbound reports are customizable. The data is customizable, so you can get whatever you want.
So let me switch tracks to, we got from a UX script to a something that
Now that was a UX-driven performance test, by the way.
That is right. We repurposed it.
This system actually can run performance tests at the UX level with real browsers, including intermixing browsers, and you can bring up thousands, hundreds of thousands. We've had customers bring up over 1 million concurrent browsers and run their performance tests all the way essentially to the user's eyes, basically. So this is a very powerful capability. You could also run load tests at the API level, which people are more used to doing, but you're missing all that client-side code. So with this, you can actually run that, and you can actually run those in parallel. You can run a load test with a performance test essentially in the same scenario. Run things at the API level as well as at the UX level, and look at those different timings and compare them. So again, the number of things you can do here go far beyond what anyone's ever been able to do before.
That's right. So in this case, I'm going to use a TestNG example. So here we have different types of ways of passing data to your TestNG example. So here we're using a keyword called the data provider, TestNG keyword. We give it a tag like DPL data provider, and we're giving it a map, right? And this is going to be used to execute a test. In this case, a simple one. This is the first example that I'm going to show you, and we have compiled this example along the source code into a jar file, Appvance testng.jar, and we've given it the class name, map, and we've given the DPL data provider, and we've set up the data production library.
Let's talk about this, because this is a very, very powerful concept that we talked about in one slide in 30 seconds or so, but it does allow you to take individual unit tests, which you could string together in series. You could have essentially a preamble and a close down, and by doing so, you can dramatically increase your test coverage and dramatically increase the productivity of your developers by allowing them to take their unit tests and extend them and data enable them and run dozens or hundreds in parallel, again with no additional coding. They've already spent their code. They already spent their time coding the unit test. They don't have to do anymore, and this system really empowers TestNG and JUnit in ways that have never been empowered before.
Right. And we have many ways. I'm just going to show you just a small sample of all the variety of ways. So this is using a way of passing a hash map to your TestNG example. So this is a CSV file that has all the data. And for here, we've chosen hash DPL read CSV provides a map dictionary, right? And when you execute it, I'm going to press the play button right now. It's going to execute it as a simple test. And as this test is running, let me explain another TestNG test case. So here, I want to test against a database. My database, sample test database, has all my data. So here, even though I provided a default data provider, this test has this information where I got this definition value and definition ID is from my database. These are from my tables. So I want to be able to hook them up, right? And so here, the way that I've set up this test, so it is similar, test-based DPL DB, most of the classes, and resources. Here we go. So I have set up RDBMS map DPL query database, provide map dictionary. I specify that's an Oracle database, credentials, and I've specified the query that I want to run that extracts that data for me. That sounds very simple. Okay, let's go back to the results. So here, I've executed that test. It had 3 rows in that CSV file, and so for each of these tests, it executed these tests and has a lot of the reports.
Now this could have been, if you had the database for it or the data for it, this could have been hundreds or thousands or n number in parallel.
Right, and we're going to execute the database query, which is going to come back with 10 rows of the query. You can make it 1,000 rows if you want to. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm just going to work it on 10. So you're getting an example of this TestNG example working on 10 rows returned by this query. Right? So we have more ways. We have Locker, which is something that we have built ourselves. You can grab data from the Locker. which is running per instance, and then find that way as a way to pass data to your testing program?
And I think that's an important thing. This data production library, which you're seeing now in unit testing, actually works for all different test types and between all different script types. So this could be a performance test, it could be an app penetration test, it could be a load test, it could be a unit test, and you can pass data between them in the data locker and actually pass data between your scripts. So you can get something from one script, pass it to the next, and on and on and on, and then check against certain data and say, hey, I want to know in an assert situation or in a comparison situation, how did that compare? I was expecting the number 47. Did I get 47? And that is really a very, very, very powerful capability here as well. So all of this data enablement occurs between any kind of script type at the developer level, at the QA level, even the business analyst could record scripts and then pass data between them inside the system. Again, no coding necessary to do that.
And yeah, we have a number of ways of passing data between scripts, different types of scripts. That's why we want to create a common language of having DPL as a common language of passing data between not only same script types, but different script types.
Great. Do we want to show anything else here in terms of Designer?
Yeah, we can quickly go to. We spent a lot of time making scripting much easier than what it is, especially for the UX level.
Well, I think one of the things we recognize in all the different types of applications I talked about, HTML5, Angular, JS, Java thick client, Oracle Forms, etc., Windows, is that the kind of recordings we've had in this industry, recording scripts, has been poor at best. I mean, it's one of the big things you see when people are using Selenium, which is now kind of a decade old or more. Perfectly fine idea, but you're writing Selenium, and so we have a lot of customers that have been writing in Selenium a long time. They're very good, and we say, and we watch them. Actually, we timed this. We said, let's see how long it takes you to write out a use case, and they'll script a use case and get it working. A longer use case maybe in 30 minutes or 20 minutes, and you go, that's pretty good. And then I go, I'm going to record that same use case, and we can record that same use case in 3 minutes or less. And that's an eye-opener for people. But we did spend a lot of time creating a recording capability that is the best in the industry by far. And so recorders have been around for 20 years. It isn't a new idea. I think it's a new idea to do it right. So the other thing we did in recording is we said, we're not going to give you 200 pages of junk that you got to sort through. If you've clicked on 15 items, that is, you got 15 steps, that's all we're going to do is show you those 15 in an IDE, and you can edit them and do whatever you need to do. So go ahead.
Okay. So I've chosen a sample application, an e-commerce application.
So e-commerce free application, right?
Yeah.
Because we host it, so we're not hurting anyone's actual application when we run this.
So, and you can record in a variety of browsers. So I'm just going with Firefox today. And I'll just explain briefly what is happening. So when I entered that URL, the first action that's recorded in Designer is the URL that's going to be representing the application. I'm just going to click through it and just interact with it. I'm going to pause here. So everything that I clicked is recorded over here. And here, this is what is known as the accessor column.
Yeah, so we actually use 21 different ways of locating an object. Here we're just exposing a few of those, 4 or 5, but in each of these cases underneath this there are multiple more. And that could include text in the object, include the object ID, include a custom object ID, include it's always going to be the left of this object or the right of this object, or many other ways to note that object. That allows you, the writer of these things, to say, hey, I want to weight these. I always want to choose this kind of ID. So for instance, there's customers we've got that write applications and they use a data accessor ID that they always stay the same on those objects. That'll never change. Everything else can change, but the developer can't change that. And so we can tie to that. So you can always tie to the least brittle way of recognizing any object, as opposed to just XY coordinates, which of course is usually dangerous, or just the Selenium ID or something like that. So this is a much broader way to find objects over and over and over again, no matter what else changes in them and how the developer changes them, you're still going to see them there.
Okay. And all of these, the normal actions that you're doing, you can change the quantity fields, interact with the UI, and say checkout.
Now, by the way, how we're doing this is we've injected, in the case of HTML5, we've injected our own JavaScript inside the browser that is watching everything that's happening really inside the browser and watches all the JS interaction that's occurring. And this works, again, for anything in HTML5, Ajax, JavaScript, AngularJS, etc. We basically do the same with Thick Java Client inside a browser and do something quite similar to Thick Java Clients on the desktop, Swing Apps, AWT, SWT, and also do something similar for Citrix and Windows applications. So this all works the same and then places this in essentially an IDE that you can now go through and edit, but normally you don't have to do anything to it. But we're going to show you just a few things that you can edit and how you can quickly data drive any of these columns.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording. If there's any line that you don't like, you want to delete, this is an actual IDE. So you can say right-click, delete, right? And I'm going to save the script in my repository.
And by the way, your repositories that are getting Subversion are fully supported on here. You enter your credentials and it'll always go there, and you're fine. And all your results go there, etc.
So now what you want to do is, now that you have a script and it has hard-coded values like these, you can edit them and change them if you want to, but what you really like to do is to be able to data drive them. So I have a CSV file that has some data in it. And so I can just click, drag, and drop. And I can save. Now you have a data-driven UX script.
Without writing any code.
Without writing any code.
And that can be unlimited columns and rows. And we're going to grab whatever comes in that column or row as you selected and replace whatever you did before with those, right? So however many rows, however many columns, it's very powerful. And that can be random, they can be in order, they can be in pairs, whatever you need to do. So login IDs, et cetera, et cetera. Again, we didn't write any code, it's just drag and drop. Super easy to use. And this works now, this designer use case, for example, can be used in any of the test types. I can data drive or use case drive an app penetration test or a DDoS test or browser compatibility test or a performance test. Can even turn this into an API level test for load and soak and things like this. So this is an extremely powerful concept. We're about to close because we're just running out of time. And we're not set up with a camera today to show you how this works on mobile, but in fact, we do something similar with mobile devices. And with a mobile device, you actually use your mobile device, and then we capture what's happening on the mobile device and actually write scripts for you at the API level for sort of a variety of tests, both to the left and the right. So that's a pretty good overview. I don't know if we've got any questions. I'm going to look across the table to Rebecca here, and got it. Yeah. So so that's a good question. Is how do you extend to thousands of concurrent users, whether it's a performance or load test or or a unit test? Actually, the system automatically ramps up the number of servers that it needs in order to be able to do that. So if you're an Amazon or an OpenStack Cloud or SoftLayer, it has all the protocols it needs to actually build itself, put itself on the servers, ramp up the servers, know that the servers are ready, execute the test, tear them all down, and bring you your results. We had one customer last year on our performance product ramp 2,500 servers to run their tests. So you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about number of servers. The system will really handle all of that for you, and does so in a grid as well. So you can do the same thing in a grid as well. We got another question is how many test seats can this support? Actually, arguably an almost unlimited number. I would never truly say unlimited, but lots. And the reason is that the controller itself is really just, this is all browser-based. So the controller itself, you're talking to it with a browser, and what you're really doing is just storing scenario files. That's all that really ends up happening on the controller. And then when you launch a test, all of those tests really run on those test nodes. So the controller itself is not a very busy animal, and so you can have really as many test seats as you want. Pricing, yeah. So the system can be priced and used as a SaaS offering, and you can use it again in that mode directly if you're testing mostly applications that are publicly accessible. But it's also often licensed behind the firewall. Financial institutions and others, HIPAA or other reasons, people want to test mostly behind their firewall. Often the QA systems that you have aren't accessible outside the firewall. So this fully works behind your firewall, and we license it behind the firewall. And that pricing is based on number of test seats and a number of maximum virtual users for some of these tests. So there are 200K customers and there's $2 million customers, right? So it really depends on how large you are and how much you're going to be using this. What got us to unified test? That's a great question. So I'm going to go back again. We spent time with roughly 150 customers. We did also some broad-based surveys. We surveyed 200 CIOs. Even I personally talked to about 150 CIOs myself. We really recognized that the QA automation tool vendors have been very siloed for 20 years. And that led companies to silo their teams to focus around a tool that they got. So they got a load testing tool, and they formed a load testing team that knew how to use the load testing tool. Well, it's not wrong. It's just that's what you were handed from an industry for many, many reasons. Not because the industry was dumb, but partly because we were all limited in CPU, horsepower, memory, etc. Well, today, when we've got essentially unlimited CPU horsepower at our disposal with the cloud and unlimited memory and unlimited bandwidth, you get to rethink all of your systems. It wasn't that long ago when the QA system sat under someone's desk. That was the QA system. Even when you were doing integration testing, there it was. It was on a box. Well, today, we can pop up 25 servers in a staging, system in 5 minutes. You can memorize that in SkyTap and bring it back up again, or if you're doing containers, whatever. That is pretty easy. So why wouldn't you rethink the fact that you can do your unit testing and functional testing, integration testing now all in parallel? We see so many companies that say, well, it takes 36 hours to run that. And I look, and each test takes, 10 minutes. So why don't we just run those 800 regression tests? Why don't we just run them in parallel? And they look at us like we're crazy. But in this era of being able to pop up a staging system that fast, you would run them in parallel. It makes sense. So in a way, this is a test platform, a true automation platform that was built for today's era, where we have cloud and we have the ability to, even in a grid, pop up systems as big as we want and tear them back down and not have to fill out a lot of paperwork and give it to ops. We can just do this automatically now. That's the power of writing something that's really the first new platform in 20 years. And so that's what we did. So I'm going to, we got a couple more questions I'll get to. I'm going to come back to the last couple of closing slides here. If Rebecca, you want to hand me the screen here, and let's see if we can do that. Show that window. Okay. Gain velocity, use the weight. Clearly, this is a play on words, because W-A-I-T would otherwise be spelled incorrectly, but I like it. With that's today's comedy moment, right? Look, I think there is this push to move faster, whether it's DevOps or CI, CD or Agile, whatever process you're in at your companies. This is the first platform that really unifies test in so many ways that we talked about today. It unifies your teams, it unifies testing from different kinds of tests, and it unifies all these different test types to reuse the same use cases over and over and over again. And you no longer have to, I had a customer ask me just last week, well, in performance, maybe we have to really think what use cases, are worth doing. I said, well, yeah, that's because it used to cost you a lot of time to develop a custom use case for a performance test. But if you can just reuse the 40 that you just wrote for a functional test, run them all. Just push the button. All of a sudden at the push the button time, it gets a lot simpler to not worry about it and run everything you've already written, just data enable them, right? So you really do see improvement in productivity, increased collaboration and communication, streamlining QA, more importantly, far better test coverage with the same team and the same effort that you've had. Just a quick question here I see on IoT devices. I'll answer that. So because everybody's got their IoT programs now. Just the way we do mobile, we do IoT. So in fact, we create a proxy for the IoT device. You can just let your IoT device talk to whatever it is, if it's a refrigerator or some building monitor or a consumer product. And your IoT device just talks to its server, but through our proxy, we actually write the script for you. So we write the use cases for you. They get written in HAR. We've now got HAR not only data enabled, but auto-correlated. And we don't have time to get into exactly what that means, but most of you probably know what that means. That's the first time that's ever been done in the industry. It's a very powerful concept. And so you've got auto-correlated, data-enabled HAR, automatically written for you. You haven't written a line of code, and you've got all of the kind of test cases and use cases that your IoT device is driven. And not only can you run that as a functional test and a unit test, you can run it as a performance and load test, scalability, and you can also run it as use case driven app penetration. And in IoT, app penetration and DDoS are really critical at the server level, at the API level. So those are things that are built into the platform now. It's incredibly powerful. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your excellent questions. And I know we'll see you at our next webinar. Goodbye.